Well, good evening, Green Valley and Rebirth Christian Fellowship Church. How are you doing tonight? Yeah, that's right. That deserves a little golf clap there. That was good. Very good. You're going to need to do better than that later on. Hey, I'm glad you guys are here tonight. Just a little background about how we got here, and we'll tell you a little bit more in just a minute. But those of you who are familiar with Green Valley, you know, some months ago we talked about 4 focus points that we're going to kind of hone in on as we move forward as our church. And one of those is we are a movement of Jesus followers who pursue racial unity. And we talked about there's 5 things that we want to do in that pursuit. We want to learn, we want to listen. There's going to be some times that we need to lament and be brokenhearted about where we've been and maybe even where we are. And then we want to live and we want to lead differently. And so tonight is one of those opportunities to do a little bit of all of that. Basically learn, but most importantly to listen. And so I'm so excited that you're here tonight, but I'm excited to have my good friend Doug Taylor here tonight. Doug is the pastor at Rebirth Christian Fellowship Church in Center Point, Alabama. It's a church that he and his wife Shay, and Shay is here. Glad to have you here, Shay. We're basically glad to have you here. They launched in 2001, and let me just tell you that they are creating ripples all over Center Point and the community around Center Point. It would take most of our time tonight for Doug to tell us all the different things they have their hands in. We're blessed. We were with them, I guess, a couple weeks ago down at Christian Service Mission, packing some Thanksgiving boxes that we're going to use and they're going to use in the coming weeks. And so we look forward to more opportunities like that. But I want you to welcome my good friend Doug Taylor to Green Valley tonight. You know, as Doug joins us, we've been in a group for about a year or so together with some other guys, and that all came together through the brainchild of our friend Tracy Hips, who's also in the group with us. Tracy, wave down there. Tracy is the executive director of the Christian Service Mission, and he does some unbelievable things in the greater Birmingham area. One of those things that I believe is he brought us together with some of our friends. And so, brother, have a seat. We're going to have a conversation. I told him he's in for it tonight. About 2 months ago, Joellen and I went out to Rebirth on a Sunday to worship with Doug, and I've been waiting for this. Okay. And so I called him and told him, "Hey, we're coming to church Sunday. I'm going to sneak in." And Joellen's coming with me. He said, "Well, first of all, you're a 6'3" white guy. You're not going to sneak in." And so that was the first thing he said. And I said, "Well, you know, I just want to I'm just there to kind of cheer you on." I said, "Okay." So I get there. They put me on the front row.
Yes. Center aisle.
Center aisle, right there, front row. And so we go through the service, had a great time. We get to the end. I said, "We're good." And Doug comes back up to close the service. He goes, "I'd like to introduce my friend Jeff and his wife Joellen to you today. And Jeff, why don't you come on stage and share a word with us?" And as I walked by him, I said, "I'll get you for that." And so welcome to Green Valley.
Hey, thank you so much for being here
tonight. So
thank you so much.
We're going to have a conversation and have payback all in the same time. So anyway.
And he did a great job. He came when he did a great job.
Like I said, we've been in a group for the last year plus together talking about some of the things we'll talk about tonight and a whole lot of other things. Just tell our folks tonight, what have you walked away with after we've been together for a year in the conversation with our fellow brothers?
First off, I have to say thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Tracy, for bringing us together. Yep. One of the things that I walked away with, it's interesting the time that we got together. Mm-hmm. We met at the height of racial unrest. Mm-hmm. And I'll admit, I walked into the room and I was a little militant. And I came in and I said, "I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to be politically correct. If I was invited, Tracy knows me for double-digit years. If you didn't want me, don't invite me." And I came in with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. And after a year, I found 2 things. I found, number one, that there are more that be with us than those that be against us. I walked away from our initial meeting telling my wife, "I'm not angry enough about racial injustice after meeting you." Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, it's been a great journey. Joellen knows that it's the one thing that I look forward to every month. I never miss. I think Douglas says the same thing with all the things that are pulling at him, and the other guys that are in our group are the same way. we talk about a lot of stuff. We started in the height of racial unrest for sure, and we've covered a lot of topics since then. And we were here today meeting. We actually met here today. Our group did. This was our meeting day, and so we were actually here. So Doug's been here most of the day with us. And so, but one of the things that we've talked about in there, and I think is important for us as we pursue this racial unity, as we listen and learn, is we love people's stories. One of the things that's on the wall. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a story. Every story matters to God and to us. I want you to talk to us a little bit about your story, your experience as it relates to prejudice, mm-hmm. injustice, racism, however you want to phrase it. You tell us your story tonight.
Well, I guess as I was thinking through this, I look at racism from, really depends upon the day. Because for me, I have several emotional responses to racism. They range from anger to regret to fear. Early on, so stories, my mother, not my story, but her story, my mother taught at Tarrant Middle School for 30 plus years. For about 20 years, she was the only African-American teacher there. She taught 7th grade social studies, and I was about 9 years old. She came home one day, it was Christmas holidays, and one of her 7-year-old students said to her, with the parents standing there, he said, "I never thought I would like a N teacher, but you're the best N teacher I could have ever had." And my mother had to stand there and smile, and she looked at the parents. The parents looked like they could have melted. And as she tells that story, I learned a phrase that I've coined called functional racist. That these are parents that were at all the PTA meetings, that had sent her gifts, that had hosted and sent cookies, but at home they referred to my mother not as a good teacher, but an N teacher. And I learned that day, and I still remember, that there are so many people that function well, but in their heart and in their homes, I'm not referred to as Pastor Taylor. Yeah. And what it did is it built a wall. It unfortunately gave every person, every Caucasian, in the back of my mind, I wondered, who am I really to them? Another thing I walked away with from our interactions is with a confidence that a little conversation heals a whole lot of hurts. Just us having those conversations, having these conversations, and the conversation that will happen after this day will be a healing balm for both sides to find some common ground.
Wow. You know, I came home from our first meeting, and I don't know if I've told you this, but Joellen was ready to hear the report, and I'm sure just like Shay was. And I said, well, I loved it, and I said, you know, I've found my brother coming from the other side, and Doug, because we have a lot of the same personality and some of the approaches to things and the passion, good and bad. We would both say about some issues. You know, to kind of follow up on that. And you kind of hit it on a little bit in the group, but having to hear that, having to live that, how has it made it difficult to be open enough to have this pursuit of racial unity? You know, not with just our group, but on a daily basis.
Again, it depends on the day. Mm-hmm, yeah. Because there are days that I'm just gleefully optimistic. There are other days that I'm reminded that there are a lot more conversations to be had. Mm-hmm. Years ago, it was about 10, 12 years ago, I was in Houston preaching, and one of my practices is during my devotionals, I walk, especially when I'm in a different city, I walk around, just kind of, see the city. And I'm a pastor, I'm a community leader, I'm a father, and I'm sitting outside a hotel about 100 yards, reading my Bible, and a police officer pulls up. And he says to me, "What are you doing here? I don't think I like you sitting here." Mm-hmm. I realize at that point, I'm like, I've done nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm a 40-plus-year-old man, and I am terrified whether or not I make it back to my state. Yeah. That shouldn't happen. No. a surveyor was at my home, I guess about a year ago. He's sitting in front of my home. I walk out to my mailbox, and I ask the guy, he doesn't see me walk up, and I knock on the window and say, hey, can I help you? And he turns and says, can I help you? And I says, well, yeah, you're in front of my home. He was like, oh, you live here? And I said, yeah. This is your house? I said, yeah, it is. I just wouldn't expect you to live here. And I'm reminded on a regular basis that as much as I love this environment and love having these conversations with you, that I can unfortunately never lower my guard completely, because everybody doesn't give me that same leeway. Yeah. I have a 20-year-old son at University of Alabama. That my greatest fear as he left to go to college was, is he going to get down there and it was in the height of again, social unrest. And I had to tell my son, who's on the dean list, to come home for 4 days. Yeah. That's hard.
Yeah. It is. I think a lot of times people talk about, and we've talked about it here, the listening to learn, and people, I think the biggest question people have is the lament that's got to break all of our hearts. I mean, you know, we've had those conversations, but if you're listening tonight, and those are who will be listening online, those things, you have to realize that's reality, and it should trouble our heart, not only for Doug, but Doug's a singular story that's repeated over and over again every day. One of the reasons we called, when you and I talked about tonight, we purposely called it a conversation about racial unity. Why do you think we're having such a hard time as a culture and as a society to have a conversation about this subject that really just hovers daily in people's lives? It hovers daily in our country, in our culture, our community, our city, but we just seem to not be able to have a conversation. But we can yell about it.
Sure.
We can fight about it. We can go to our own corners, but we're having a hard time having a conversation. What do you think?
Well, I think one of the things is no society wants to be held accountable for their own sins. The Bible says that every man's ways are right in their own eyes. And we don't want to come to grips with the fact that we are not an equitable country. Mm-hmm. There is not a level playing field. And as a country, as a community, in our homes, husbands, wives, nobody wants to come to grips with, you're not perfect. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of all the amazing things that we have in our country, God bless America. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to where people say, well, if you don't like what's going on in America, then you should go back to Africa. Why am I going to Africa? I didn't build Africa. Yeah. I mean, I pay taxes here. Yeah. You leave. Yeah. But the problem with it is nobody wants to, or many times people don't want to be held accountable to the fact that we have flaws. You know, and then to some degree, I liken it to the story of blind Bartimaeus. When he's in the tree and he's screaming, you know, Jesus, don't pass me by. Well, all the other church people told him to stop yelling. Mm-hmm. And the issue is, if you've seen all your life, it's easy to become desensitized to the screams of those who've never seen. Okay. Yeah. And so when a blind person screams for justice, our as the scripture was, don't bother God with this issue. That's not that big of a deal. Or there's the insult of, at least you can hear. Mm-hmm. You can't see, but at least you can hear. And that's many times where I've seen people of my race, and even I've been offended to say, well, at least things are better than they were, and at least you can do this, and at least you can live there. Well, that's like saying, well, you're blind, but at least you can hear. Well, you've got it all. Mm-hmm. You know? And so I think we have this mentality that just be happy and let's not deal with the scars and don't make a ruckus. But you're asking Jesus for something too. because everybody that followed Jesus wanted something. So why is it an issue that I am screaming for the thing that plagues my life? You're screaming for the thing that plagues your life. And we all need something from life. And I think it's a level of selfishness.
Yeah.
And I think there's a level of again, not being willing to admit that we flawed. I think we just want to not deal with the pain of it. I have a friend, very, very good friend. He made a statement to me. He said, well, Doug, I just think we should just move on, and I don't believe in white privilege. And I told him, you don't have to believe in something to get a benefit of it, because you don't have to believe in gravity. But if you get on the building and jump off, it's going to work for you at 9.8 meters per second. So just because you don't believe or understand something doesn't mean it's not working for you. So,
yeah. You know, thinking along those same lines, you and I have talked about this. The conversation, no matter what comes up, it seems like people kind of go to their corners instead of have a conversation and yell kind of across each other and across culture. You know, we talked about it today. I was watching the news last night. There were a couple of elections last night in Virginia and New Jersey and some other places. And Virginia was one that our country was watching. And one of the key issues was critical race theory, which seems to be the hot topic everywhere.
Sure.
One candidate said it was a racist dog whistle. And the other candidate said, I'm making a commitment never to have it taught in the state of Virginia, which to my knowledge it's not. But I'm thinking, here's two political figures who took something that came out of a conference in 1989 from an individual named Kimberly Crenshaw, who was asked about it in the New York Times and said, I don't know why we're talking about this now. The reality is, there's a ripple effect to sin. There's a ripple effect to racism. You can call it critical race theory, whatever. We need to talk about it. It's present. But thinking about that specific issue, because I know it's on people's minds, why can't we have a conversation about that and we have to use things like, well, it's a racist dog whistle, or it's never going to be taught, and nobody suggested that it be taught for most parts. But we can't, you and I have talked about it a lot.
Sure.
What's the problem with that?
I think the problem with it is defending traditions, history, culture, and we make altars of monuments. We make altars of people, and we make monuments of these experiences. And when we sacrifice what I call these sacred cows, I think many times one of the principles of spiritual practice is reflection. And in part of reflection is we come back, we have to evaluate not only what did God say, but what is God saying right now. And so the evolution of the church is because we've continued to go back and revisit practices, principles, look at them in the context of the society as it is. And there are certain things we just don't want to go back and revisit because we believe we're trying to blame somebody. So you want to blame it? We're not trying to blame anybody. We just want to have a conversation. I had conversations with my kids, and I'd say, "You left the door open," and well, I left it open because I was running late. I had to do this. And my issue is, I don't want to punish you for leaving the door open. I just want us to set some practices to let's not leave it open again. And so I believe many times people think when we have these conversations, it's because we're looking to blame or looking to punish. I'm not trying to punish you. I just want to have a conversation so we never get there again. You know?
Yeah.
And without these kind of environments to listen and, as you said, learn, possibly lament, we never get there. I mean, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not be perfect. And it's okay to listen. Well, I think one of the flaws, again, I got to say, God bless America. One of the flaws, I think, in our country is if you're always used to being the teacher, you're always uncomfortable being the student. America always feels as if we have the answers, and we can never take counsel. We've gotten into wars that were none of our business because we thought that we were supposed to fix everything. And everything is not for us to fix. Some things are just to listen and learn and to observe. And without a willingness to be humble and seek to learn, I think we'll always be on the defensive because we think we're being attacked. We're not being attacked. We're just trying to advance.
I got you. You know, like I said, I'm one of the things that troubles me, and we've talked about a lot, is our inability for people who are Christians to enter into the culture, enter into the public discussion, and we tend to act like the lost world in our conversations. And I think part of that is not willing to listen to people. As you think about maybe our unwillingness to listen and to learn and to take a conversation about where we have been and where we are and how far we have to go, one of the things we talk about here, if you look at over a 400-year period from 1619 to today, for 246 years we had slavery, however you want to define it. For 100 years, to 1865 to 1965, we had legal segregation, legal racism, Jim Crow laws. 1965 to today, on the paper, we've had the potential for unity.
Sure.
So 13.5% of our 400-year history, we've had it on paper.
Sure.
What makes it so difficult for people just to see that and to say, okay, that means we probably need to talk about some stuff.
Sure.
And is that what you're talking about when we're not willing to just sit back and go, hey, let's just look at where we've been. We're not blaming anybody.
Sure.
None of y'all lived in 1619 or 1865.
Right.
Is that kind of what you're talking about when you're unwilling just to sit down and have a conversation about
Absolutely.
the facts?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Just let's let our guard down.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's not feel attacked, but let's just have a honest. Let's just look at society. Let's we have to view this in terms of our intersectionality. I'm a 49-year-old black man in Birmingham, Alabama. This is an interesting thing. So you talk about 1965. That's less than a lifetime ago. What it means is the people that were using the hoses are probably still alive. The people that the hose was turned toward are probably still alive. That means if they're still alive, they're mentoring, teaching, and parenting people that are alive right now. Some of those thoughts are still being populated today.
Okay.
If we don't just stop and say, listen, let's just look at statistics. Without cognitive dissonance, let's just look and see, is that fair? And I think we have to look and see, when a man is on the sidewalk, begging for his mother, taking his last breaths, if my first thought is, what did he do? As opposed to what's being done to him, I'm jaded. I'm jaded. If I'm not giving this human being the same shake to say, if that were my son, my daughter, my niece, would I be enraged? Or am I looking for a reason to justify that action? If I'm looking for a reason, I'm jaded.
I think that's what we all have to kind of pause and ask ourselves and look. You talk about reflecting a lot. I know that's a principle and a discipline of yours, to be still.
Sure.
I think it's hard to check yourself to see if you're jaded without that, I believe. Sure. I think you would probably agree. Thinking about that and those things we've talked about over the last few minutes, I think it'd be interesting as you think about having your own conversations. You're thinking, wow, y'all have some serious conversations. We do.
Oh, yeah.
But we laugh a lot. A lot of times we get in the car, and both of us have done that. We've texted each other before we get out of the parking lot and go, I'm sorry if I was a little too hot today. If I came in a little strong one day. We both do that. I mean,
sure.
Before we get out of the parking lot. And usually you get the emoji back that says, hush. And I don't want to hear any of that because that's part of the conversation.
Sure.
And I don't think that probably happened in the first meeting. We were all just staring at each other going, I wonder if we're all coming back to the second meeting.
Right.
But now, after a year, it didn't take very long, though.
Not
Very long at all. I mean, probably the second or third meeting, and Tracy sits over in the corner, and he smiles like, I knew this was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
He does it.
He's a puppet master.
He's a puppet master.
He just sits back. And
he just looks, he's over eating his cookie the whole time. And so just smiling the whole time going, I knew this would happen.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's interesting for people who have not been in the conversation.
Sure.
To talk openly, to agree, even to disagree.
Sure.
And go, man, I don't get that. You're going to tell me some more. To say, you can get in the car and go, that's okay that we did that. And then come back and go, hey, you want to go eat lunch next week? So,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just, until we're willing to have that openness to share like Doug does, and the openness to listen, and then to follow up, I think that's key to our conversations, and I hope people are hear that. Let me change gears just a little bit, because you hit on it a minute ago. One of the phrases we hear a lot on this topic is, well, things are so much better than they were. And I know that both of us, nothing gets us uneasy more than that statement. One of the things that Jesus prayed in John 17, and this is what we're aiming for as a movement of Jesus followers that pursue racial unity. Jesus prayed to his heavenly Father for his disciples, and then he prayed for those that would become disciples because they heard the message through them. That's us. And he says, I pray that they would be one.
Sure.
There would be complete unity. And then it's that phrase where he says, that they may know I'm the Son of God. Is our unity limiting the kingdom business, or lack of unity, excuse me, limiting the kingdom business based on that prayer?
Oh, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll also say, I think we're all guilty of it.
Yeah.
We pool among ourselves because we're wired to gravitate toward pain and not pleasure. There's a level of distrust. There's a level of cynicism, the wondering, what do they really mean? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's me, you talking. You guys aren't here. We do it in our churches. Yeah. African American visits a Caucasian church. We're going to be loved on to kingdom come. Mm-hmm. And then you wonder, is it genuine or am I being tokenized? Caucasian visits a black church. 8 times out of 10, they're going to be on the broadcast. Because then I wonder, am I being tokenized? So I think we all have to be conscious. Are we seeking reconciliation because it's right? It's what Jesus wants? Or is it a trophy on our desk? I've got black friends, I've got white friends, I got black members, I got white members. Yep. I believe if we talk about it, like I never tell people I'm fat. You can tell I'm fat.
You talk about that a lot, and it's not true. What's wrong with you?
Oh no, man. Yeah, it's rough. So I believe again we have to check our hearts and say, is this really authentic, or is it an objective? And I think it has to be intentional. But I believe if we would just, as it's beautiful the way you guys phrased it, it's just our mission. When it's authentic, God honors it. He creates conversations. Like Tracy was led by God to bring us together. Mm-hmm. I believe we put ourselves in the path of supernatural connections because God knows the time. He knows the seasons. Just like he said, he'll make them one. All the times and seasons are in his hand. I don't know 5 years ago if I would have had this conversation. Mm-hmm. I hope I would have. I pray I've grown since then. Mm-hmm. But and I've attempted to have these conversations with other people because it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't God led. Yeah. Our interaction has been natural from the first day. Yeah. I forget you're white.
On the other side of that, where Doug says 5 years ago he might not.
Except when you walked in the building with 6'3" white guys. Like, that's 6'3" white dude.
Except for that one Sunday, sitting right there. Anyway.
Yeah, I just want you to be my friend.
Yeah. Well,
I don't want you to be my white friend.
That's not the way to do it, though. I'm telling you. No, I'm just joking. On the other side of that, where Doug said 5 years ago he didn't know if you'd be ready to have this conversation.
Sure.
5 years ago, I'd said, forget it. I'm tired of trying to have it.
Sure.
And we talked about that, that I had been in the process in Mississippi of doing some of these things that we're doing here that were new where we were and different. But there came a point, I'll be honest with you, I had to confess to our church and to anybody that's in my group that we led, I quit. I quit some years ago. And so it's over the last years, Joellen will tell you that passion, the burden, the lament has risen back to the top of my spirit. And then walks in Tracy in a couple of situations, and then you walk in. So I look at our time together really as a God moment, a God ordained thing. But what I want and what I'm really praying for is not for us to have big events. We've talked about that. We're not. It feels good to get together, and we're going to do some of that probably at some point. And
sure.
we've been serving together. We're going to serve together at an event coming up. But ultimately, it's about folks just having conversations at Panera. That's my spot, but you pick your own spot. And whether it's like we do it or somebody else does it, that's where it's got to start. Because one of the reasons we're here, and I want to get your feedback on this, in my opinion, and I've been told I'm wrong on this, so you feel free to join the company. The biggest problem in our culture today, especially I feel like on this issue, has been the failure of the church. When the church has been called to set an example from the prayer of Jesus in John 17, the church has been silent, justified, given theological foundation to racism and prejudice over the last many, many decades, however far you want to go back. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that as we sit amongst the movement of Jesus followers tonight? Give me your opinion on that, whether the church where does the church have to own its failure at where we are today?
I think the church has to, again, not accept blame, but at least accept some accountability. A couple years ago, I was at the Bible Museum in Washington. Mm-hmm. And true story, I saw a copy of the Slave Bible. Yep. Blew me away. Yep. The Slave Bible had been rewritten by slave owners to teach slaves that slavery was God's will. Yep. All of Exodus had been removed, so that as slaves read it, they got no inspiration about being freed from Pharaoh's reign. Mm-hmm. The first 8 chapters of John, the St. John were removed because the slave owners did not want the slaves to read, "Who the Son sets free is free indeed." Mm-hmm. That's crazy. Yep. And they were given those Bibles to read. Scriptures like "Slaves, obey your masters as it is pleasing to the Lord" were highlighted. That's what was preached. That's what they told the slaves to preach other slaves. Mm-hmm. Come on, man. I mean, yeah. That's what people used the Bible to indoctrinate slaves to not only appreciate, but think that slavery was God's plan. It's horrible. For 20 minutes, I was mad at God. Yeah. I was mad at the Bible for 20 minutes. I was mad at God. I was angry at the Bible because I'm telling God, why would you allow this, the symbol of our freedom, to be used to subjugate people? At the next display, I saw Benjamin Banneker's Bible that he used, that was in his pocket the day he died in the war. He's the first person. I saw Nat Turner's Bible. I saw the Bible from the first AME church, and my hope came back that the same Bible that the devil used to try to subjugate all these people was the same Bible that God used to establish hope and bring transformation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Let me get pointed with a question here. as it relates to the Green Valley family, and I know from your perspective, you and I have talked about, and you knew about it before our church family did, about the 4 focus points we have here that we started earlier this year, because I talked to you about them. And one of those was going to be, we're going to be a movement of Jesus followers that pursue racial unity. You are now the pastor at Green Valley for the next few minutes.
Oh, man. Do I get an office?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Let's talk about benefits.
We're going to see how you answer this question first. Anyway, you're the pastor at Green Valley for the next few minutes, and we have stated that we are going to be a movement of Jesus followers that pursue racial unity. What do you got to say to the church family?
Tonight is a deposit in our transformation. And what you see happen here, take it back home. Amen. A one-on-one conversation, because this conversation may not be able to be facilitated in a circle of people that are not willing to listen. Sometimes our audience is the greatest thing that keeps us from overcoming. When Jesus wanted to minister to the guy that was blind, he took him away from his city. So sometimes in order to see, we have to move away from our city. And our community will not always allow us to see freely what Jesus wants. One of the things I'll tell you, shortly after we met, after George Floyd's death, I did a month of teaching called The Talk. And it was about doing exactly what we're doing right now. We had little handouts and all the stuff to give our members resources to have a one-on-one conversation around a cup of coffee. I was criticized by the time I got to my third lesson. I was criticized by some of my counterparts because they thought I had gotten too soft. And the truth is, and there's a balance to it, because while you and I are talking about seeking reconciliation, there's still a lot of people that say, I'm not at reconciliation yet, I'm at justice. We can't get to reconciliation until we get to justice. So let's have the hard conversation, and then we'll clasp hands. But we're not going to kumbaya until you acknowledge that our society is corrupt. Then we can shake hands.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm glad you said that, because you have to walk into these conversations with your eyes wide open.
Sure.
I was eating lunch with another friend that's a African American pastor in Birmingham, and we can go back and forth at each other pretty quick. And he told me, he said, there's some people don't want me eating with you. I said, well, are they in the restaurant right now? I mean, that's all I need to know. I know, are they in the building? But I loved it because he was that open. He said, man, I've got some folks that were, and you said it earlier, what made me think of it. He said, I got some folks in our church that were on the other end of the hose.
Sure. And
he said just exactly what you said. And I took that, and it broke my heart for the person who said that, but that they had that much hurt, that much was caused in their life, but also appreciated, and I appreciate you saying, I'm going to come, we're going to take the next step anyway.
Sure.
You're no longer the pastor at Green Valley now. So before they begin to call you and they ask you what you're doing Sunday, you're busy. When I was over his church a couple months ago, I don't know if they told you this or not, but I walked out after he called me on stage, and so I was like, I can't believe he did that, and I'm going to get him back. So your worship team was out in the parking lot, and I said, you ought to quit. And we have a place for you. Mason would love to have you on stage, and so if that comes up, you behave, because they've been offered other jobs. And so anyway, as we kind of land this plane tonight, anything on your heart that you just, hey, so we ain't got to, and I know we could talk for a while, but that you want to kind of close us out with tonight?
I just want to say how proud I am to have such a brave friend, because this is a dangerous conversation, and this is a hugely it's huge. I guess I can just say it this way, risk for you to make such a public stance. And I know you've been doing this for years, but I've been in Birmingham 49 years. We're not crazy enough to think that everybody, can I say in the room?
You say whatever you
I'm
want
the
to.
pastor. Wait a minute, I'm still the pastor.
You're still the.
Okay, I'm the pastor again. I'm the
you're
pastor
installed
again.
for 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So.
I'm not crazy enough to think that everybody in the room is loving this conversation. But I am going to say, I just pray that you opened your heart and opened your eyes just a little bit more. Even if I don't quite understand it. My wife and I say this all the time when we've learned to disagree, and we say, I don't understand, but at least I'll accept it. I don't agree, but at least I'll acknowledge your stance. Because if you've never lived it, you can't understand it. But you can try to acknowledge its reality. And there are things on the other side that we have to work to acknowledge. I just want to say again, I would just hope that you would model this conversation and be brave enough and bold enough to say, hey, I want to try to understand. And your bravery, your boldness, Tracy, I can't say enough how proud I am to know you. I thought Tracy was more black than me. More black people love Tracy than love me.
Yeah, you got a point there.
But just to bring this together and just your leadership, your boldness, and your openness to this, I'm just grateful to be a part of it. I just really believe that this is part of the turn and the fulfillment of Jesus' prayer that we talked about earlier. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Doug. I want to echo what Doug said, is this, for you to just ask yourself, hey, what's my next step? I think God will really show you if you really, I always say, be careful what you pray for. You pray today, you pray tonight, you pray this week, God, hey, I want to take the next step. I want to walk through whatever door you open. And I pray that you get to meet a Doug Taylor somewhere along the way to have these conversations. And I'll tell you, and Doug would tell you the same thing, we're going to do our very best as pastors of the 2 churches that we pastor to facilitate those in a lot of different ways. And we're already in the process of doing that. And because it's not easy. I know there's some people out here, and not everybody, and there'll be a lot of people watching going, I'd like to do that, but I don't know how or where to start. And so we want to be part of that resource for not only our 2 church families, but for our community that will be listening in to this. And so, are you glad you've been here tonight, huh? Amen? So, thank you for being here. Shay, thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing at Rebirth with Doug, and what a blessing that is. So I want to pray for us, and then we can fellowship together. Father, we thank you so much for tonight. We thank you for Doug and Shay and Rebirth and that Rebirth family, what you're doing through them in Center Point in that community. And Father, we thank you that our paths have crossed. We know it is through your hand and your guidance. And so, Father, we're thankful for tonight. I'm thankful for Doug personally. I'm thankful for his willingness to come and to share his heart tonight and the way you use him. And so, Father, we just pray that for us moving forward, that we all ask, hey, what's our next step? Because none of us have arrived. We've never arrived in our walk with you and our service to you. And we certainly have not arrived in our pursuit of racial unity. And so, Father, I pray that we just be open to what is next. And we pray these